So, like, most of my family's racist. My racist grandmother and aunt hired a private investigator to track down my fiance, watch his every move, all because he's not white. Before we start on this story, I would like to put a warning on it. This may trigger some hurt in some people who have been through something similar, and I'm sorry if it opens any wounds. Please know that I respect anyone who has lived with people in my story, and I would love to hear from you. Okay, here we go. I'm 25 female, have been dating the love of my life, Damon, 7 years now, which is, I know, unusual for people as young as us. We met when I was 17, and we were friends for a year before we got together. We were both dating other people at the time when we first met, but we were part of the same friend group and saw each other all the time. The first time I met Damon, I thought he was a really attractive boy. But I was with my boyfriend, and I'm not the type of girl to cheat on people, and so it never came to be anything. We were just good friends, and I was also friends with his girlfriend. Well, I broke up with my boyfriend and was single for a while, and I was getting ready for exams for university, and did not want a boy getting in the mix. I heard a few weeks later that Damon and his girlfriend also actually broke up. I spoke to his girlfriend not long after they broke up, and she told me it was actually a platonic breakup, as they were going different universities and did not think a long-distance relationship should work. She also said she felt she was too young to commit to one boy. She's a lovely girl, and we're still friends with her and her long-term partner. Damon and I finally get together at a Halloween party, where I was dressed as a rabbit. A lot of the other girls had gone for sexy costumes, but I had not really thought about looking for a boy, and had gone for a full-on fluffy bunny outfit, which it turned out I could not do a lot in. Damon was dressed as a pumpkin with a huge round costume, so we made a pair of idiots who could not dance or sit down. We laughed about how impractical our costumes were, and we got together that night. I told my mom that night that I'd met the man I was going to marry, and she laughed and said, "Honey, you're 18, there's no need to hurry." My dad pointed out that they had been 19 when they met, and so I guess knowing what we want runs in the family. Before we go any further, I'll get to the hard bit of the way. I live in an area that in some ways has not moved forward with modern times. People are stuck in the past and refuse point blank to move forward. People hold the same opinions of that of their parents and all the generations before them. My mother, she was raised here, but my dad was not. My dad's a different nationality than my mother. He's from Europe, and it was looked at with suspicion when his family moved here, but it meant he did not hold the views that, well, held so many people rooted in the past. My mom's family are not in any way liberal, and that is where the problem starts. You see, while my grandparents did not approve of my dad marrying my mother because, well, he was an immigrant, he could be forgiven for that because he's white. Well, Damon's not. He's African-American descent, but he was born in this town just like me, and so where are his parents? His grandmother was from Jamaica. This thing is, being born here does not change the opinion of my mom's family if your skin's anything other than white as snow. Yeah, my family are a bunch of racist. Damon has become used to it as it's ripe in this town, but he should not have to. We're planning on moving away once we're financially stable, as if we get married and have children, I do not want them to grow up here. My mom grew up in the same household as her sister, my Aunt Belinda, but they cannot be any more different. My mom's a liberal and supports acceptance of all races, genders, religions, and sexual preferences. And my aunt and the whole family hates anyone who's not straight, white, and Christian. They're not very good Christians, as they hate too many people if you ask me. Once Damon and I got serious with our dating, my mom's family were horrified, and it led to a lot of arguments with them, just between my parents over whether I was a bad daughter or not. I think it settled down because they assumed we would go to different universities and break up, and I would come to my senses. It turned out we went to universities that were really close to each other. We did not break up, and we're still together 7 years later. I don't let it bother me as I know that they're small-minded bigots, but then things got a lot worse. A month ago, my parents arranged a holiday for all of us to visit my dad's family in Europe. We also invited Damon's mother. His dad passed away when he was young and she's never married again. It was an amazing trip, and we all had a wonderful time exploring and visiting my dad's family. On our last day, we went to a beautiful beach where the water was like crystals. We spent the day swimming, laying about in the sun, and as the sunset began, Damon got down on one knee. And he did it. He proposed to me. I was so happy I cried and said yes over and over again. It truly was a perfect moment. Damon's mother had given him her engagement ring that his dad had proposed to her with, and it was emotional for all of us. I flew back home happier than I've ever been, until reality decided to remind me of where I actually lived. It's traditional here when people get engaged to make an announcement in the local paper, so everybody in town knows. Well, we did that because we wanted to share how happy we were. My mom's family did not take to it well. With hours of the paper being published, my phone and email were burning with messages from relatives saying I was a disgrace, and that I'd let down the family line and they could not believe I was about to mix the bloodline. I cried myself to sleep that night as they were putting a stain on my happiness. Damon and my parents told me to not let it get to me, because I should have known what they were like. I'd be happy to never speak to them again, but my mom says if I do that, that means they're winning. She says, and Damon agrees, we should just raise above it and carry on. So I guess the whole point of what was going to ask for your opinions is, do I try and carry on and hope my family just accepts my relationship? Or has this broken too much? What's up everybody, Mr. Reddito here. We have 4 updates for this story. We're going to jump into update number 1, but before we do that, if you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito and I read stories every single day of similar topics. If you're into that kind of thing, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and let's jump into the first update. I'm overwhelmed. I'm just overwhelmed with the amount of support I've had in my initial post. It's actually really scary how many people have faced the same amount of racism. And all that other isms, as we are right now. I've read happy stories and some awful sad stories. My heart breaks for everyone who suffered through the actions of their family. So, I decided to update to answer a few questions I was asked. The most common one was, why did we not cut off contact with that side of the family and just be done with them? We've considered it so many times. I mean, so many. But then someone always happens, and we're drawn back in. Also, I should have said in the last post that there are some members of my mom's family who are not actually like the others. One example would definitely be my grandpa Bob. He's one of the sweetest men I've ever known, and I cannot for the life of me possibly understand why he has not left my grandmother. She makes his life absolute heck, and he's constantly having to apologize for her behavior. There are also some of my younger cousins who have been raised in a very different world. They see much more than the smallness of our town through social media. They actually recognize that the things my grandmother spouts out are not true, and people are not defined by the color of their skin. My mom has said that when my grandpa dies, she'll cease to have contact with my grandmother and my aunt. But until that time, she'll have to bite her tongue for grandpa's sake. I did ask him once why he stayed married to my grandmother, and he just smiled sadly and said, "Well, we all have to live with our mistakes." I don't agree, but I'll also be there for him. I try to meet him at least once a week for lunch, and we sneak off without my grandmother knowing. It's been our own little secret for years, and I love it. He's also kind to Damon, and Damon loves him back. The next common question was, will they be invited to our wedding if they're that racist? I wish I could say no. As it stands at the moment, we're going to send out invitations to the entire family, as excluding people will give them fuel for the fire. If we did not invite my grandmother, she would immediately put all the blame on Damon and say he was preventing her from seeing her granddaughter get married. We need to be the better people. I hope that answers your questions, and once again, thank you everyone for your advice. Update number 2. Something strange is happening, and I'm not sure what's going on. I'm either losing my mind or someone's messing with my head. I came home from work yesterday, and there was no mail in the box. I'd been expecting paperwork from some of the wedding vendors that we've asked for quotes, but there was nothing in there, although the flaps was open. I just assumed the postman had opened it by accident, and we had not mailed it after all, but this is where it gets weird. Damon realized that we'd forgotten to fill up the car from his work trip, and we went out to do that. When he came back, our box was full of mail. Now, I don't know how it's in the other places, but our postman do not deliver past 11 p.m. It was very strange. I'm wondering if we have a new postman and he put our post in a neighbor's box or something, and when they realized, they just returned it to ours. It's the only logical thing I can even think of. The only problem with this explanation is that all the mail was open. Maybe kids have been messing around, I don't know, but at least it turned up and I can start to look through the prices and we can start to plan stuff. We've looked at the venues, although we're not thinking of getting married until next summer. I want to have a summer wedding and the year is starting to fade. I have this girlish version of a blue sky, beautiful flowers, even singing birds. I know it's a bit vomity, inducing to others, but for one day, I want to be a princess. My mom and dad think it's hilarious, as I've always been a real tomboy and live in jeans and boots. I did wonder if I could get away with my cowboy boots under my dress, though. My grandmother did cause a few problems this week, but that was to be expected. She came around to my parents' house, which is unusual in itself, and brought brochures for wedding venues in our area. I was suspicious from the get-go, and, well, she's telling everyone who will stand still long enough just to listen that her granddaughter's letting down the family name. She can pretend all she likes that she's being nice to us, but when she came over that evening, she said hello to my mother, dad, and myself, and totally ignored Damon, who was sitting next to me. It just went downhill from there. The brochures were all big old plantation houses, which are in their way incredibly beautiful, but they're not somewhere we want to get married. My grandmother had a stupid smirk on her face the whole time, saying she thought it was an appropriate setting for a marriage such as ours. It took everything in me to stop myself from smacking that self-satisfied smirk off of her face. Damon placed his hand on top of mine and shook his head slowly. My mom just told her we'd already picked somewhere that was much more suitable. So, we would not be needing her brochures, and as soon as she left, the brochures went straight to the garbage. I cried once she left, and how can people just be so hateful to each other? I'm so scared my wedding day's going to be awful. I said to my mom that there was a part of me that just wanted to give up on this big old wedding thing and run away to get married. My mom sat down in front of me and told me that if I did that, they win. Once I calmed down, I knew she was right. And I will not have my family spoil what's going to be the happiest day of my life. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. 2 more updates to go, and things are about to get messy. I hope you're enjoying your day so far. Let me know in the comments if you like this type of story. Updates, multiple updates, and full videos all in one. Drop your thoughts down below, guys, and let's see what the heck's about to go down. Update number 3. This is going to be a long one, or I might break it up in a couple of updates depending on how it goes. I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around the whole thing, and I'm not sure I even have the full story yet of how low my despicable family were prepared to sink because of their racist, bigoted ways. It started small until we got to the larger things. We probably would not have put it all together as an ongoing campaign against us. Well, I say against us, but it should be saying it's against Damon. At first, it was not obvious, but Damon kept being pulled over on his way to and from work. Once or twice, we thought it's just because the police here are known to pull over certain groups of people more than others, but then one week he was pulled over every single day. He went to work for different reasons, and they would say there were reports of a dangerous driver, reports of him drinking in his vehicle, reports that he was dealing illegal substances and so on in parking lots. He was breathalyzed every day for a week. Everything he was let go because he would not drink and drive, but it began to look like a campaign against him. We would also get a lot of phone calls that hung up when I answered, or a female voice would say, "Do you know where your man is?" Most of the time, my man was just sitting across from me, but it began to happen more often when we went out. At this point, I went to speak to my mother as I was beginning to suspect that my grandmother had something to do with it. My mom said that she would speak to her family, and for a while, I guess you can say things calmed down. Damon and I talked a lot over these weeks about whether we should cope with this kind of thing over a long period of time. I was much angrier than he was, though. He would gentle stroke my hair and tell me that we were better than them. He would put up with being pulled over as much as it took, and nothing would ever make him not want to marry me. It's good that he felt that way as it continued over the next few weeks. It accumulated in us being pulled over as we were coming back from the movies, and the police had received a report of a black man kidnapping a lovely white girl. I was so angry, and I had to admit that there was a lot of yelling in the car park, where the police were questioning us. The yelling was coming from me. I absolutely lost my mind. I yelled about how I was sick of this stupid racist town, and people need to re-educate themselves and stop living in the past. I may have yelled that the police might want to spend more time catching actual criminals than bothering innocent people who are just trying to live their lives. And that's how I got arrested. For disorderly conduct, they say. I don't think that's what my grandmother expected. I have no proof that she was behind that call, but I know it in my bones that she did it. I had to phone my father from the police station to say that I've been arrested. Could he please come bail me out? Damon had driven to my parents' house as he sensibly knew that it would not help if he got involved. My dad came and got me, and I sat in the passenger seat of his car, not daring to look at him. I was so ashamed. However, my father broke the silence, laughing, saying he was proud of the little human rights spitfire that he raised, but could I try and get arrested at a more normal time of day when he was not already settled down for the evening? That comment did what it was intended to do, and I laughed harder than I had in a long time. We'd spoken to my dad's work lawyer, and he's told me that I don't need to worry. The case will go nowhere, and if anything, we would possibly have a case for harassment when he saw how many tickets Damon had been given in the past few weeks. My aunt phoned the other day and told me in great detail what a disgrace I was, standing up for Damon. She asked what I was thinking getting myself arrested for attacking the hard-working policemen who were just doing their jobs. I asked her if she thought their jobs were to harass people with different skin colors. She told me to grow up and hung up the phone. Man, I hate that woman. Anyways, that's how my grandmother and aunt started with their campaign, and I think after I was arrested and had shown I was prepared to go to jail for my man. I know, that sounds so romantic if I say it out loud. I'm prepared to go to jail for my man. They decided to try a different way. I'll split this up, and the next step is the plan, well, it's less in our faces, and I have to admit, downright sneaky. As such, I think it needs its own section before I tell you how it all went down. Update number 4. Final update. I can't believe I'm saying this or that, or I would ever say it in my life about someone in my family. My grandmother and aunt hired a private investigator to track my fiancé to find evidence that would make me see the light. And not marry him. I had to give them some credit and that they are totally insane, but they sure are dedicated. If they put this much effort into making the world a better place, they would be seen as absolute heroes. But no, they would much rather try to make the world a worse place. It turns out my aunt knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a private investigator. Are you confused by that? Yeah, I was as well. My aunt likes to hang out in this dingy old bar and pick up an inappropriate men who my grandmother should have a problem with. But it's okay because they're all white. Who cares if a man beats you as long as your skin color matches, right? So, One drunken night, my lovely aunt decided to hire a PI to track Damon to find proof that he was bad. My grandmother withdrew money from her savings to pay for it, without my grandpa knowing, of course, and they gave the PI instructions to find dirt on Damon and his family. If they could find anything at all. The PI suggested that they invent some and frame Damon. As you can see how he was a respectable PI in every way, right? He also ripped my grandmother off, which I would not care about if it had not also been my grandpa's money. So, the PI starts to follow Damon everywhere he went. He checked our mail, the last time it was my aunt, and he was more careful as we did not know he was doing it. He managed to check our financial situations. He looked Damon's driving record up, his work life, and then looked at his mother's life as well. We were oblivious to all this at the time, despite his shady ways. The PI was discreet. I can only assume that he found nothing that would be a good argument for me to not marry Damon, and so he decided to try to make some up, a little more underhanded method. I assume most people know what a honey trap is, but for those who don't, it's where this beautiful girl, or man, is used by the police or a PI to get information from someone or make them do something that they might not want to do. The hard part of this plan was that it's unusual for Damon to go anywhere without me. We are the one of those sad couples who do everything together. However, as the PI was into every part of our lives, he found that Damon had a work night coming up that I would not be going to as I was going away for a weekend with my mother, just to have a spa weekend and treat myself and relax from all this stress. The work night was going to be in a restaurant and then a jazz club. Damon had said he would just go for the meal as I wasn't coming, but I told him that he should go have a good time with his buddies. Of course, if I knew what was planned for him that night, I would have told him to get home, spare us the grief that came after. Anyways, I guess you could say I'm getting ahead of myself. I only found out what happened the following morning. I had no idea what to think. I was torn between needing to believe in Damon and thinking that things had maybe broken down. The work meal had gone well, and then they had moved on to the jazz club. Damon remembers everything about the meal, and the first few songs at the jazz club after that's a blur. The next thing he remembered, he woke up at our house in bed with a woman he did not know. He was naked, and realized his world was about to fall apart. I had to give him credit at this because he phoned me before anyone else did. Well, at this point, he wakes up the woman by accident, and she'd laugh in his face, pulled out her phone and took a photo. She winked and got dressed and left. He saw her get into the car and he did not recognize outside the house, and that's when he called me. I was hysterical at the hotel we were staying in, and it took a lot of patience on my mom's part to get what happened out of me. She listened and nodded carefully before going off the phone my dad. By the time she came back, I was asking how could he have done this to me. My mom looked me right in the eyes and said we should not jump to conclusions until we hear the full story. My dad came to get us and we drove home to find Damon a broken mess. He said he had no memory of the night before and he didn't know who the woman was. I was ready to yell and scream and tell him to get out. But then my grandmother appeared with my aunt. She laughed and gloated as she stood in my living room saying, "I told you he would let you down. They're all the same. He can't control himself, bringing home another woman." That was the point where my logical brain kicked in and I said quietly, "Wait a second. How do you know what happened? We hadn't spoken to anyone about this, and the only people who should know at this point were Damon, my mom and dad, the strange woman, and myself." It took the others a bit longer to catch up with my train of thought, and the look on my aunt's face said more than if they've confessed to being responsible. My dad told Damon to phone his boss and see if he could give him any idea of what happened in that jazz club. This conversation made the pieces begin to fall into place, and my grandmother's plan crashed down like a house of cards. Damon's boss had seen that Damon had suddenly appeared very drunk, which was strange as he's not been drinking much. They thought that he was ill and arranged for a cab to take him home. He had left the club on his own, and somewhere between the club and our house the woman had appeared. I said that we needed to get the police involved as she'd obviously broken into our house and went to get the phone. My grandmother, to her credit, stood firm. But my aunt broke. I think she saw the things were getting out of control and there was a risk that they could get in trouble. She starts to talk. She was singing like a canary. The truth came out. She admitted that it was all just a setup. Fugazi. My grandmother was furious and started yelling at my aunt, and it got insane there for a little bit. Finally, we found out that the PI had been in the club, and he managed to slip a little bit of something illegal. An illegal substance right into Damon's drink, which was enough to knock him off balance and make him look like he was flat out drunk. He then helped Damon's boss get Damon into a cab, followed him back home when the girl was waiting. She had been paid to get photos, which made it look as though Damon had cheated on me. My grandmother was convinced that this would make me end my relationship with Damon, as I would never want to be with a man who would cheat on me. I've never seen my mom look so angry as she did that morning. She's a complete hippie and thinks anger is unhealthy, but she told my grandmother to get out of the house, and as far as she was concerned, she's no longer having a mother or sister. She then called the police and Grandpa. My grandpa first arrived, and when he found out what's happened, he slowly sunk onto the chair and cried. He apologized again and again for not being strong enough to protect me. The police arrived and for once did the right thing. The PI, arrested, and the woman who took the pictures. Well, get this. Turns out that was the PI's sister. Also arrested. When questioned, the woman admitted that nothing had taken place of the sexual nature. Her brother stripped Damon, and she had just hung out waiting for him to wake up. They had thought he would either lie and they would out him, or he would admit it and would dump him. For the PI, the man was not very intelligent. My grandmother and aunt were not charged with anything, as it could not be proved that they had anything to do with the PI, and they definitely have no proof that they told him to go that far. They insisted that they only told him to take photos and follow Damon just in case. And they pretended they were looking out for me. I didn't believe that for one single minute. Well, I guess this concludes the nightmare in some ways, and from the mess a few good things came out. Firstly, my mom finally cut off all contact with my grandmother and my aunt. The more liberal members of the family also finally decided to split from the main family as well. And I'm rebuilding my relationships with my cousin. My marriage is going ahead as planned, and I knew Damon would never have willingly cheated on me. He did not cheat on me at all. Finally, is something I never would have predicted. My grandpa met Damon's grandma and, well, they hit it off. They've been going to lunch and playing cards together. Damon's mother told me that they're going to our wedding as each other's date. It's beautiful, it's cute, yeah. I think my main take from all this is that some people are so full of hate, you can't save them all, and you cannot change their minds even if you try. Protect yourself and surround yourself with those who love you, and cut the bad elements from your life completely. In the end, if you try and keep your relationships with them, you're gonna get hurt. You can't choose the family you're born into, but you can certainly choose who you keep around you in life. What's up, everybody? Let's go ahead and give a quick shout out to Damon in the comment section. Damon really held it down. Everybody was against him in the story. Well, basically everybody. They were all racist towards Damon, but he knew what he wanted, and that was the love and affection of OP. And in the end of the story, it looks like everything worked out for them. Guys, let me know your thoughts about this one. I know the aunt and grandma kinda got away on the hook. All they got was probation, but hey, what did they say about karma? It comes, and it comes swiftly. If you're new to the channel, hello, my name's Mr. Reddito. I read stories every single day of some of the most dramatic-filled, wild stories I can possibly find on the World Wide Web. If that's something you're into, smash that subscribe button, guys. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you tomorrow.